I'm feeling just a little rusty having been away from the podcast for the past few weeks. I better call our producer before I just jump right back into the swing of things.
Hello?
Hey, Phil. I was just wondering if the show has changed at all in the time since I've been away?
Not really. It's the same format. We've missed you while you were away.
I have an idea. I think we should start to do sketches. We could even do sketches instead of a teaser. And get this, the best part, we won't tell Ebony and Anita. We'll just surprise them.
Carol, I love this idea.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is episode number 12. I'm your host, Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined by the same old Ebony Astor.
What?
Plus,
shock, horror.
Plus, everyone's favorite, Carolyn Pettit is back.
Yay! Hi, everyone. I'm back. So good to see you.
This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love, or alternatively, we're the feminist killjoys coming for your media, depending on your perspective. On today's show, we're going to check in with the latest pop culture news. We're going to discuss Celeste, the new game from the creator of Towerfall. And finally, after months of lobbying from Carolyn, we're going to talk about Oscar-nominated film Call Me By Your Name. Then we'll finish the show by each sharing a little something in What's Your Freakout? And as always, exclusively for our fantastic drip backers, we'll be recording a bonus segment. In this week's bonus segment, we're not entirely sure what we're going to do. So, if Call Me By Your Name goes a little bit long, we're going to move that into the bonus. Everything Feminist Frequency produces, including this very podcast, is listener, reader, and fan supported. Thank you for helping us stay on the air and on the web. If you want access to special perks and exclusive backer rewards, join our podcast community at d.rip/femfreak. Now on with the show. What's up, Carol?
Hey, Anita. Well, I just want to say, before we go ahead with the show, that I'm treating this as just a total, like a warm-up podcast. This doesn't count for me. It's not real. So I make no claims to the intelligence or validity of any thought that I'm going to try.
Why is that? Were you just on vacation or something?
Yeah, I've had 2 lovely weeks off from the podcast, and I'm not sure I remember how to podcast, but I'm going to do my best. But
that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, really.
We've been floundering without you.
Oh, I know.
Although we did have some great guests that you missed out on, so we'll have to get you in on the guest pool.
I would like that.
Yeah. Well, we are so happy to have you back.
Thanks.
Yeah. Ebony? Do you have anything?
No, I'm still salty about same old.
Yeah.
I'm going to just be over here in my, bitch crate. Mad about that for the rest of the podcast.
I feel like I give you such wonderful, glowing titles in Star Trek.
And what, it was time to be done?
That is a little bit. It's time to just,
Y'all,
I humble
you hear
you a
what
little
I have
bit.
No. Not today.
Let's check in with some entertainment news.
Yeah, definitely got some really, really exciting stuff happening this week in the world of Hollywood sexual harassment.
I'm sorry.
Is that a little too dark? I don't know. That might be a little too dark. But
it's appropriate.
Okay. So, 2 big stories in that realm. One being that Uma Thurman had an interview with Maureen Dowd in the New York Times, where she sort of finally kind of outlined the implied stories, about Harvey Weinstein and harassment that she's been clearly carrying with her for some time. And while the stories about Harvey Weinstein are horrifying and definitely need to be heard and acknowledged, they're also very much in line with a lot of the kind of behavior we've already come to expect from Weinstein through the other stories we've heard. But what was particularly interesting to me about the Uma Thurman interview was that she also spoke about Quentin Tarantino on the set of Kill Bill, kind of really pressuring her and not taking no for an answer to do a stunt that, a stunt person could have done. There was no compelling reason why Uma herself had to do it. She really didn't feel good about it, but he put so much pressure on her, and she did do this driving stunt, and she got into a wreck and injured herself, and could have potentially died. And it just is this illuminating story about how, the abuse of power by men who are sort of have this image of being like reckless but creative and powerful. Like, it's not just in purely sexual encounters or relationships. I mean, that this is an abuse of power of an entirely different but also extremely dangerous kind. And
absolutely.
So I think
it's a part of that bullshit like genius auteur
garbage
that it's like, well, it's worth it if we can get this amazing thing because he's a genius filmmaker or whatever.
And definitely there were tweets this weekend too about how the standards are so completely different for male directors or female directors. It's like that kind of behavior is a sign of genius coming from a man, but if a woman tried to kind of run a crew like that, she probably
it would rightfully be called out as being abusive. Yeah, and people are giving other examples like, Meryl Streep talking about how Dustin Hoffman slapped her on the set of Kramer versus Kramer. So it's like, the first take, and how it sort of completely, shook her to her core, but, as was her first movie, not feeling as if she could say anything. People talk about, William Friedkin scaring the shit out of his actors. But yeah, just this kind of, level of toxicity that when directed at women in particular, but also other, vulnerable people, the kind of level of abuse we rationalize as saying, we place in primacy, like the art over the humans who have a part in creating it. And I mean, as much as I can't stand, Maureen Dowd and hate that she was the person who, got to talk to Uma about this, I was glad that she took the time to frame like, this is, people talk about Miramax being the house that Uma built, like that. Miramax got to where it was based upon, who she was and what she did. It wasn't just Quentin Tarantino. And yet that so often gets elided. And look at what it cost her.
Yeah. So, a slightly maybe more hopeful movie story to round things out, though, is there were photos that came out from last Monday's Black Panther purple carpet premiere.
Hey now.
That were just like so stunning and
they were amazing.
So amazing. And just to see, the stunning and beautiful, blackness of these actors being celebrated in this way that is so, again, like so radical to see that coming out of like a Hollywood premiere. It was breathtaking, and definitely I think the excitement for and around that film has only gotten more intense since that premiere occurred.
I think people assume they know what a watershed moment this is going to be in Black cinema going, but y'all have no idea. this globe is going to be turned upside down. Oh my God, Anita.
What about me?
I'm telling you, like, I'm gonna be useless. I'm gonna be useless for a good 2 days in advance and 3 days after. Yeah. So just sign me off.
All good. I'm not gonna be in town anyways, so
good. Perfect.
We're going to go see it, and then I'm going to leave town. I'm going to ruin this happy moment, though, because I think that we did another take of this and had to throw it out, but I think that the other piece of news that you had is really important.
Okay,
and I think you should share that.
Sure. So, also, it's important to remember that it's not just the privileged white women of Hollywood at all who find themselves being sexually abused or 9 women of color actors came to the Washington Post to speak about their experiences with a manager named Vincent Cincerione. And Vincent is a man who is known for being the kind of person you go to if you are a woman of color who wants to break into Hollywood. He has been instrumental in the careers of Halle Berry, Taraji P. Henson, and now it's clear that he has really abused his power as that person. The person like, hey, if you're a black woman and you really want to break into Hollywood, you go to this guy. He has just really abused that reputation, trying to negotiate terms with many of the women who came to him along the lines of, well, I'll take you on and represent you, provided I can, have sex with you at least once a month, like whenever I want, those kinds of things. So, really, really horrifying and
just so heartbreaking because we know, making a career in Hollywood is not easy for any woman, but particularly for women of color, there are additional barriers. And so to have, one of your kind of few avenues to entry be this motherfucker, and to have it be like, for him to use the name of, Halle Berry or Taraji P. Henson as he did, to kind of silence these hopeful women and get them to agree is just galling. It's just fucking appalling, Yeah. And I know that Halle Berry has not she divorced professionally from this guy when she first heard about some allegations 3 years ago. So these women, like Taraji and Halle, they're in no way culpable for what this guy did. But the fact that he used their names and their success to gain additional victims is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I ruined the flow of your entertainment news.
No,
it would have been nicer to end on the great images of. But
you're right. That is an important story.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to Celeste. So Celeste is a platforming video game by Matt Thorson and Noelle Berry. Matt and his team are responsible for Towerfall, which is the epic, amazing, wonderful game that everybody loved. And so this is a sort of long-awaited follow-up to that in some ways, even though it's a completely different kind of game. It's spectacular. And we even got Ebony to check it out, even though Ebony doesn't really play games.
Listen, okay. So my old arthritic fingers can barely hold a mug of coffee, let alone manipulate game controls, all right? I know this, you know this, I'm cool with it. But I downloaded this game full of excitement and then had to with shame and humiliation admit I wasn't getting anywhere. I was getting nowhere. And then Caro, with her sweet self, was like, no, the game is actually very hard, whatever. And I was like, okay, so maybe it's not just me. And then we streamed Celeste last week in the stream. And y'all, the distance to which you were able to go, I didn't know the game went that far. I straight up was like, what is this? I didn't know these levels existed. I couldn't get. Now, in my defense, I downloaded this to a Mac. I don't have a console, so I'm playing on the keyboard. So I do think that was an extra level of difficulty. But with the assist, I had to give up. I played a couple of hours. I got absolutely nowhere. I would have gotten as far if I had not played the game and just drawn pictures of what I thought it was on a Post-it. It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
I would
apologize.
I would never have been able to play it with mouse and keyboard either. So the game is. What one of the reasons we want to talk about it is not only I love platformers, right? That is my jam. This game is fucking hard as shit. It's really, really hard. But I think what makes it so special is the story.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so you play as this young woman whose her name defaults to Madeline. You can name her whatever you want, but we'll call her Madeline.
Do you think I had such a hard time because I renamed her Dip?
Yes.
Oh, that may have been it.
Okay.
Yep.
That probably was it.
Yeah. So, and she comes to this mountain that is kind of described by other people who've encountered it as a place where inexplicable things might happen. You kind of get the sense that it's a place of some spirituality or magic or some kind of energy. And we don't really know exactly why Madeline is driven to conquer the mountain, but we can tell that it has to do with her. It's a kind of internal journey as well as an external one. She is trying to confront things within herself that maybe she doesn't like, and I just think that the way that the the mechanics of the story that make you feel like you are struggling your way up this mountain, and the way that you get clued into Madeline's kind of internal struggles as she makes her way up the mountain is really effective.
Yeah. So one thing that it's a game about mental health and depression, right? So first off the bat, like that's phenomenal in and of itself. But this game marries the mechanic and the story in a way that we keep talking about the next evolution in the games industry has to be, how do you marry mechanic and story that's not just shooting dudes in the face for 20 hours? And this game does that in a way that was really deep, right?
Yeah.
Like, the story is not subtle. It's not nuanced. It's very clear what's happening, but it's still great. Like, I don't mean to say it's not nuanced in a bad, like, as it's a bad thing.
I think it's very kind of archetypal in the sense, like, it's meant to be a story that and almost any of us can kind of project our experiences onto in some way. So I think that in that way, it's going for a kind of, I mean, there's a specificity in terms of Madeline and her relationships, but also it's not detailed to the point of like, it feels a bit like a dream.
Yeah. In the game, you see a mirror, and then there's a version of you in the mirror, which the internet has started calling Badeline.
Badeline, yeah.
Which literally all my notes call her Badeline, so we're just gonna go with that. And they do this really lovely thing where clearly Badeline is the sort of demons inside of you and the struggle, and like anyone who has dealt with depression very much can resonate with, or any kind of like mental health difficulties, I think. But they specifically talk about depression here. And so she is resisting you. She is trying to stop you from climbing the mountain, and clearly climbing the mountain is like victory, right? It's like it's healing, it's whatever. And so she's trying to stop you. And some of the ways that the narrative and the mechanics mix is that like she will literally stop you from being able. She will kill you if you can't get past her. She'll chase you down. There's all these different things happening, and she comes in and creates chaos, which is very much the feeling of like she gets to a point where she's doing better, and all of a sudden she backslides, and there's so many ups and downs, which is very in line with mental health projections, right? With like, I'm doing better, I'm doing good, and then all of a sudden you're like, fuck, everything sucks again, and this voice inside my head is like stopping me from being able to progress. And that is who Badeline represents in this really brilliant way. Exactly.
I was so pleasantly surprised, like wonderfully surprised by how the game winds up handling the Badeline antagonist in the storyline, because at a certain point, Madeline says to Badeline, like, I don't need you anymore. I'm gonna like abandon. This is where I leave you behind. You're everything that I need to leave behind. And you, as a player at that point, I think, oh, okay, that's what's gonna happen. She's gonna somehow like abandon all the things that Badeline represents. But that's not how it winds up going at all. And to me, it's so wise that it doesn't go that way, so in therapy, like I've talked a lot with my therapist and stuff about how like there's this part of me that's often kind of bitter or angry about things that I feel like I missed out on growing up as a trans person or whatever it is. And, I've sometimes viewed that part of me as something that it doesn't do me any favors. It kind of ruins my life if it just makes me bitter and angry. But, therapy it has helped me recognize that, well, I can't just abandon that part of myself, and that's not the way to go. Really, I have to like acknowledge the grief, the pain, the everything, and kind of forgive myself maybe in the past for not taking better care of myself or whatever, but it requires a reconciliation. And so I think that the fact that Celeste is ultimately a story of a kind of reconciliation with yourself, with herself, Madeline, it was so unexpected for me, and so like it was like exactly right. It was like that's exactly how it should go.
Yeah.
Well, that just makes me sadder that I didn't get very far, because as an analogy for my own battles with, peace and negotiated mental stability, I gave up after a few hours. So there you have it.
The game is extremely hard. But so One thing that I like is that at the end, so one thing that I think is really hard about depression in general, or like healing from grief and trauma and all of the things tied up with, I mean, those are all of my stuff that I'm putting onto here. Those are my mental health battles. Is that like if you make progress or like you feel good for a minute and then you don't the next day, somehow you feel like you're regressing. You feel like you're not moving forward, and you are, right? Like having one day of not feeling like crap or feeling like, oh, I can see this person and feel okay, or I, ate like properly, or I worked out, or whatever it was. Even if you go back, you're still making progress. And I think in Celeste, it shows very much that up and down and up and down and back and forth. And ultimately, at the end, when they're like, Madeline can only exist on this mountain. She can only talk to her on this mountain because it's this special place. And so they have this really beautiful conversation about like I don't like Madeline is sad that she's going to be gone, and she's like, will you keep listening to me? Like, will you incorporate me into your life? And that, like, don't fight me, but, like, let's work synergistically together to, like, be a whole, complete person. And they talk about, I love this game. They did so good.
I mean, I think it's a very damaging but widely accepted narrative of recovery is that, people put on like a happy face, and you get this sense of, oh, people just progressing smoothly back to like perfect, ideal mental health or whatever. And it doesn't work that way, right? We all get setbacks. We all have our struggles. We all have better days and off days and, whatever. And the fact that that Celeste as a game acknowledges this, is so great.
In terms of the game itself, I feel like it's a really, really good platformer. It is hard as shit. I ended up, because I had to race through the game so we could discuss it, I played with most of the assists on. And at the end, I was like, shit, I didn't learn how to do anything properly. And you have to, even with the assists on, you have to like know how to do some of this shit. I highly recommend trying to play it without any of the assists on first, because the tension and the difficulty is really a part of the experience and the narrative. But also don't feel bad if you have to throw the assists on, because I think I don't want you to miss out on this experience if you're being a purist or whatever about it. But give it a try. I'm going to go back and now play it without the assists and just like struggle my way through it, because I love these kinds of games. But it is on the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Mac, PC. So it's pretty much anywhere that you can play games for the most
pretty
part.
Yes.
I mean, we're not talking about the Vita or the DS or the N64. I can't believe they didn't port it for the N64.
Man.
Anyways, please go check it out. Highest reviews from Feminist Frequency. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Now for something that gets highest reviews from one member of Feminist
Well, we don't
Frequency.
know yet, because Ebony is the wild card here. Okay, so we are going to talk about Call Me By Your Name. Carolyn has been lobbying us to talk about this forever. I didn't watch the trailer. I just kind of knew I didn't really care about this movie. I don't know why. And but I'm glad I did, and I'm going to read the description of the film just to set us up without any, and so that I don't interject any of my opinions on this. So, Call Me By Your Name is a movie.
Wow.
It's the summer of 1983, and precocious 17-year-old Elio Perlman is spending the days with his family at their 17th century villa in Lombardy, Italy. He soon meets Oliver, a handsome doctoral student who's working as an intern for Elio's father. Amid the sun-drenched splendor of their surroundings, Elio and Oliver discover the heady beauty of awakening desire over the course of a summer that will alter their lives forever. Before we start, because I'm just going to throw it to you, I didn't hate everything about it. So I want to
high praise.
Glowing recommendation.
Put that on the poster. And I didn't hate literally everything about it.
If you follow us on Twitter, I was like hyping this up a little bit, but I think that there's a lot to talk about. So I am glad that you made us do this.
Great.
So why don't you start, Carol?
Yeah. So I love Call Me By Your Name. I mean, like, to give a sense of perspective, like, I don't think I've been in the fandom of anything for a long time, but I would say that I'm kind of in the Call Me by Your Name fandom.
Now I just feel like a dick for not liking it.
No,
though.
it's totally okay. I mean, but if I were like it, so there is the thing to know is that there is a fandom around this film. Like there's so many YouTube fan videos being made that set footage of Elio and Oliver to different songs or whatever, and like
Knitting, what's up, women starting remix culture,
and so and I'm just like excited to see that stuff. Like I'm like so excited about this film and this story and everything that to know that there's other people out there who are sharing in my my excitement about the film is. It's kind of gratifying. It's cool to know, like, hey, there's this whole community of people who are like really excited about this. So
what do you love about it? Just quickly.
Yeah. Sure.
I know this is not a 10-hour podcast.
Yeah, I think that it has a kind of truth to it that you rarely see in romance films or love stories. I think that it's not a conventional polished like Hollywood romance film. It is a film that moves very much at its own rhythms and kind of captures, I think, the feeling of a long, lazy summer. And I think that Timothée Chalamet as Elio is just, to me, it's certainly the performance of the year. He just brings, I think, so much intelligence and guardedness and vulnerability and like fear and yearning to Elio's feelings that it's just one of those performances that I just love to watch. I just think that it's a really insightful, really moving, film about kind of first love and coming of age.
Sure. All right, Ebony.
Which is not to say that I don't have issues with it.
Yeah, of course.
We can talk about. I mean, the role of women in the film is troubling. I think that there's a lot to discuss in terms of, Elio and Oliver are both kind of. They perform conventional masculinity, which is also true of the men in Moonlight, and also true of the men in.
Slightly disagree with that.
You would?
Yeah, but we'll get there.
Okay,
actually, because
all right.
I think that some of the vulnerability and emotional directness is not traditional masculinity.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But
let's throw up a spoiler warning now so we can freely dive into all of this.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
She's his daughter.
Ebony.
Yeah, I had and I'm being so honest here. I had the really puzzling reaction that I absolutely loved this movie, and yet I also found it excruciating to watch and could not wait for it to be over. So if I may, I would like to read some of the notes that I took while watching Call Me By Your Name. Day 37. Oliver and Elio have taken their 411 bike ride through Italy. I look down, and in the dark of the theater, I glimpse bare peaks of my hands. I can no longer feel them. Day 51. Am I in love with Elio's mother? I no longer know what love means. Fires have broken out in the back rows of the cinema as children try to stay warm. From somewhere to my right, I hear a small cry. Day 89. I think the movie might be ending. Elio and Oliver have boarded a bus. Oliver is supposed to leave the country. Day 112. A real Return of the King situation here. About 4 false endings. Oliver is engaged. Who cares? Day 120. The credits are rolling. No one else in the theater is moving. Am I dead? Are they? I had a very similar reaction to this movie, even though it was a billion times better, as I did to the movie Boyhood, in which I felt I absolutely aged along with the characters. I loved this movie and how beautiful it was, and how, as Caro says, it kind of wrapped you up in the endless summer days of adolescence and the beautiful golden light, the feel of one day kind of effortlessly becoming another day in the summer. I loved that. I also felt as if I was aging, as if empires were rising and falling. I felt like I was a young woman when I entered the theater, and I was a retiree when I left the theater. I could not wait for this movie to be over. And I don't know how those two reactions could coexist in the same person.
Yeah.
And yet here we are. Here we are.
Right.
I'm so glad I went to go see it. I'm also really glad I made it out alive.
Oh my God. I'm still trying to recover. That was fucking hilarious. So I actually really feel what you're saying, because at one point I leaned over I went with a group of people and I was like, is this movie fucking over yet? Like, I was like, it is so goddamn long. And then there was a point where I was like, oh, it got good. Like, there was like little bits. Like, I appreciate that people like this movie. I appreciate that it is a good movie. I don't like slow movies. That's something I know about myself. And so I know that, like,
we're never going to see Transformers, Anita. Quit trying to make us go see Transformers.
That false dichotomy there. That was exactly what someone said to me. But anyways, okay, whatever. So I think that there's value to it. And so I don't want to completely write it off, but it's not a movie I will ever watch again. Like, it was excruciatingly slow.
Wow.
But
let's just quickly, like, this is the rare kind of movie that I think is paced perfectly and that I want to, like, live in. Like,
Sure.
to me, the like 1 act, 2 act, 3 act kind of structure of so much Hollywood films feels so, like, mechanical. And I'm like, oh, give me films like this that feel more like they move at the rhythm of life and let me just observe the characters and be with the characters, you know?
Yeah.
I love that.
Totally. I respect that. Like, you know, if you like Star Trek Discovery, I think you have bad taste, right? Like, I think that movie, that
Wow,
show is
Anita.
objectively bad.
Bold.
Yeah, whatever. I'm saying it. But something like this, I'm like, I recognize the value in it, even if it's not for me. And so I went and watched this. There were 4 other people that I went with. And when I walked out of the theater, it was like, everyone I was with loved it. And one person looked at me and said, have you never been in love? Like, have you never had your heart broken?
Have
like,
you no
legitimately-
soul, Anita Sarkeesian?
That was like, they were so wrecked from watching this movie that
Sure.
they looked at me with all the sincerity and said that. And I had this moment of like, yeah, of course I have, but like, is there something wrong with me that I didn't like that this was not my experience? And then I was like, no, it's fine. I can not like a movie.
Yeah.
I'll say I felt like, okay, I'm going to say what I liked about it.
Okay.
There's a point at the end where he's sitting with his dad. And
Oh
his
my
dad
God.
goes into this long monologue.
That if the
And
whole movie had
literally-
been that, I would have been wrapped. It
Yes.
was so beautiful.
Literally, as soon as the monologue ended, so they use sound very deliberately in this film, right? There's a lot of quiet moments, like quiet, like no sound, no music. And after that monologue, it was very quiet. And I heard everyone in the theater sniffling. Like, everybody cried. And one of my friends was like, it's parent porn. It's like what we wish our parents could be.
So
He goes into this whole thing where at first he's talking about the relationship with Elio and Oliver as a friendship, and I was like, oh God, what is this? But then they unfold it so well, where he's like, like, feel your feelings. Like, don't bury them. To make yourself feel nothing is a waste. And he's like, I almost had what you had, but I would give anything to have that. And then when he's like, does your mother know? And he's like, no. You're like, so your whole, like, you have this beautiful, loving relationship that's kind of like not enough for you after all of these years. And then watching that last scene with Elio's face by the fire to be like, he is feeling his feelings.
Timothy,
he's going through this.
So
was
good.
so good. It was just that at that point towards the end, I was with it. Like, I was like in it and with it. But before that, I was like, oh.
So I want to go back to what you said about like this idea of parent porn, because obviously that monologue at the end is a highlight, but there's also scenes earlier where Elio is just kind of like cuddling on the couch with his both of his parents, and they're just kind of having this pleasant family moment of like reading and everything. And then the dad says, Ellie Belly, are you okay? Like, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can trust us. And for me, I think it's so wonderful for me as a queer person to see a film in which, like, they're not completely free from worry about what anyone will think, obviously. Like, in public, they know that they can't kiss or anything. But still, like, to have had that kind of, like, acceptance and support, and to not feel the kind of cultural tremendous disapproval and condemnation of queerness weighing over them and throughout this film is really beautiful. I mean, to have a story of queer love that's not overshadowed by those things.
And his mom was like, go have a wild sex romp weekend, right? Like, his mom was like, let them go have that, like, be together. And you're like, what alternative universe is this where parents are cool?
But it's beautiful, right? It's like, that's another reason why I want to live there. It's like, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have parents that like supportive.
It was so confusing to me. I didn't understand it at first, and I was like, oh, I must be interpreting this wrong. Because I was like, parents don't do that.
Right.
European parents are cool. Come on. They're with it. I did feel like there's a version of this movie that looks radically different that takes place in America in 1983. Like, I do think there's a way in which we should talk about how men are allowed to inhabit and exhibit I don't want to say wider necessarily, but a differently inflected version of masculinity in other cultures, that's where they're allowed to touch each other, for instance, and declare their love for each other. And so, that the scene that you referenced before, Anita, with Elio and his father, when he's first characterizing it as a friendship, I actually really loved that because it wasn't, to me, minimizing the carnal, and the sensual nature of their relationship, but it also ended, kind of celebrated this like meeting of souls. It expanded the notion of friendship, or included that in the relationship between Ellie and Oliver, which I really loved. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I had a hard time through 7/8 of this movie with how young Elio looked to me. Like, I was physically uncomfortable some of the time because Oliver is a grown-ass man.
I mean, he's supposed to be 24, but
so this is actually what I was going to bring up, too, was that, like, okay, what's his name?
Yeah.
Armie Hammer is 31 years old. Right. He looked like he was fucking 35 in this movie, and Elio definitely looked younger than 17, and I could not get past that. It wasn't until after the movie that I was like, 17 and 24 was supposed to be the age difference, which, like, I still find uncomfortable, but more reasonable. I was grossed out the entire time. Like, literally, there was nothing romantic about it to me because it felt predatory and, like, gross.
Yeah, I the only reason I was able to let go of it was because I keep tossing Caro reminders about this Paul F. Tompkins thread where he talks about how Armie Hammer looks like a very well-preserved 45-year-old, but then goes on to say Armie Hammer is in fact 31 and plays a 24-year-old. So the fact that I knew that going in was the only reason that I was allowed to kind of, occasionally immerse myself. If I had not known that, I would not have been able to deal because the age difference looks so much wider.
And I couldn't deal. I wish the movie did a better job of setting up his age. Like, at least like, even if he doesn't look like he's supposed to be that age, like, at least give us some notion.
Girl, I was confused by everything. What's her name? Marzia?
The Marzia?
Girl? I thought that was his sister from the beginning.
Oh, God.
I know. Like, because when they're first in the house,
I didn't think that, but yeah.
I do want to talk about Marzia for a moment, actually, though, because I feel like that, like, I think there's a sense in which this film does wrong by the female characters, in the sense that I feel like the relationship between Elio and Oliver to me, it seems like it's almost saying, if you look at the pattern again for Brokeback Mountain and Moonlight and this film, that it's almost as if there's a pattern in celebrated films about gay male love, that men can find a kind of understanding and love with each other that they could never find with women because women are women. And I feel like even the father's speech in this film, to a slight extent, makes it seem like, even with your mother, this amazing woman, like, I could not have what you had with Oliver. I just feel like there's a little bit of a kind of like a totally unintentional kind of dismissing of women in this film.
Like, the woman who likes Oliver. You know?
Yeah, like how she comes riding up on the bike just as the bus is going away, and, Oliver kind of used her.
Yeah,
and,
she's kind of a figure of fun in a small way, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a problem with that.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like that's part of the it's part of the narrative building of being queer and exploring a queer sexuality, and Elio is clearly struggling with his with sex in general and sexuality, and
definitely,
people use other people.
They
happens,
do.
Right?
I mean, I'm not saying I actually like that the film is.
Not that it's good that happens.
I mean, I think that, when Elio says to Oliver earlier, because he's obviously trying to protect himself, he says, I saw what's-her-name at the lake naked last year, great body or whatever. He's trying to kind of perform traditional masculinity in a way to, protect himself from the fact that he obviously has all these feelings for Oliver. And so he's kind of fumbling his way through how to handle that, and he obviously fucks up sometimes.
Yeah.
It's so I just feel like, Marcia gets hurt, right? And then, I really love that moment that they have where when Elio comes back from saying goodbye to Oliver, and he's obviously so upset, she is way kinder to him than he has any right to deserve. And she says, I'm your friend. And he says, pour la vie. And they shake hands. I don't know. I just thought that was a really lovely moment, and also, wow, Marcia, you have so much reason to be pissed off at this guy. You don't have to be that nice to him.
Yeah, I found that a little. I was like, what is that? I mean, you're reacting?
I feel like I like that she's being the bigger person. I feel like to me, that's how I see it.
All right.
Yeah.
We have so much more to talk about with it, or I do. I have some very important questions.
Okay.
Me too. I have more notes.
Hold on. Yeah. No, I do too. And also, I do want to talk about the masculinity and the vulnerability stuff. So let's move this into the bonus segment so we can talk about this a little bit more, so that we don't run over on time. Does that sound good to everybody?
Let's do it.
I have questions about Converse we need to get to.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And 80s dance parties.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about. You all want to tune in to this bonus episode because we're going to be talking about fruit as well. Just saying.
Not me.
Yes.
I'll walk out of this studio right now.
Let's move on to what's your freak out? Carol.
Hey.
It's been so long since you've had a freak out.
Okay.
What's yours?
Well, I know it's a tried and true, time-tested and proven freak out, but I'm going to have to go back to The Good Place.
Yes!
Because so it just had their second season finale, which means we now have to wait for more Good Place. But without giving anything away of what's happened in the past, say, 6 or 7 episodes, I am blown away by this show's capacity to just reinvent itself and reestablish its premise over and over and over again. It just is it's just bursting with so much creative energy, and everywhere they end up going with it, it just seems so full of possibility and interesting stuff. And it's just been one of the most narratively exciting TV shows ever, not just for a comedy or, a sitcom, but legitimately interesting in terms of all the things it's doing with its story. Just constantly
how does it keep reinventing itself?
It's amazing.
And it's so good.
Yeah. You get to the end of a a concept. They kind of get to the end of one. They push one thing as far as they can take it, and you're like, okay, where are they going to go from here? They kind of painted themselves into a corner, and then boom, they invent something that just gets me excited and invested again about where the show is going from here. And so, huge props to the people who make The Good Place happen, because it is so creative and fun and funny
and smart,
brilliant and smart. Yeah,
so smart.
Like really, really asking those ethical questions. What do we owe each other?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good, so good. I might have to
right,
read some philosophy. Spoiler alert:
no.
I probably won't.
Ebony.
Okay, so I have 2 freakouts.
I didn't even ask the question. Oh my God.
Oh, sorry. Back up. Rewind. Hey,
Yeah, let's
Phil,
start
our
again.
producer, do a record scratch.
Hey, Ebony,
Anita,
what's your freak out this week?
I'm glad you asked. I have 2 freakouts this week, so I'll try and be quick. So,
It's
as
okay.
you know,
Mine's short, so take your time.
Oh, right on. Okay. So, as you know, I don't leave the house if I don't have to. So I depend upon
Humble brag.
Right? Oh, yes. Not even a humble brag. I have figured out the secret to happiness, and that is not leaving your house. So I watched a lot of crime drama, surprising no one. My freak out this week is not a good freak out, but rather a recommendation to not bother in case anyone is like me and you spend most of your time on Netflix. So I'm kind of running low on Scandinavian crime dramas to watch. So I've been digging into French ones lately on Netflix. Nope, don't have that reaction because the ones that are available, not that great. The first one I watched was called L'Amant, and it stars a bunch of amazing people, including Carol Bouquet, who's phenomenal. She plays a female serial killer. The show starts off interesting, and you think there are going to be some interesting things done in the show and within the generic conventions of it. And then it quickly, well, actually not quickly, midway through devolves into pretty transphobic trash. So this is Ebony's thumbs down to Lamont. Don't watch it. I'm trying to save the babies, okay? Like, don't expose yourself to that shit. Lamont, thumbs down. So then I needed to watch something to take the taste of Lamont out of my head. So I watched The Frozen Dead, French name Glacé. And I was telling my whole life is me just dropping suggestions for Carol in our work Slack channel. I mentioned this. If you have never watched crime dramas or thrillers before, you can watch this one, The Frozen Dead, and get a crash course in every kind of cliche that makes up these things. So like the grizzled older inspector, his surrogate daughter, subordinate, the fact that it's all ultimately about like damaged fathers, fathers
Wasn't
who've
there
lost
whiskey
their daughters.
in a car or something? Didn't you post something about whiskey in a car?
Yeah, if the dude, he straight up has. Oh my God! When he pops the glove box and there's a bottle of whiskey in there, my soul retired. I was like, this show is not going to do anything interesting, and it doesn't, and yet it scratched and itched. So I guess I'm saying a conditional thumbs to the side for The Frozen Dead. Doesn't do anything new, but does things competently. And interestingly, I feel like I'm maybe starting to get up to scratch with French crime dramas because I recognize someone in the way that, I love doing in Scandinavian crime dramas. Robinson Stevne, who looks amazing in that he looks exactly like a serial killer in everything he does. And I feel bad for that dude because I bet he never gets to play a nice person. So that's my freak out.
Awesome. All right. My freak out this week is about The Expanse. Did either of you watch The Expanse?
I saw the
Nope.
beginning of it and have not dipped back in, but I want to.
Yeah, well, you might want to reconsider that.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so my freak out is also a question for our amazing fans, which are either 3 or 1 million of you, depending on what mood Ebony is in and what secrets she gets in with our
I can't
producer,
reveal
Phil.
my metrics.
Yeah, you can't, because they don't exist. Anyways.
Moving on.
All right, so I really like sci-fi super into it. I wrote my fucking master's thesis about sci-fi TV shows. Like, this is my jam. The Expanse is so fucking boring in every way. And I was like, okay, I watched a few episodes. I tweeted being like, hey, should I keep watching it? Because I find it like 3 episodes in pretty fucking boring. And it was very mixed, the response that I got. A lot of people said, give it a chance. It gets better. Some people were like, yeah, I gave up on it too. It does remind me of the textures of Battlestar Galactica, which, like, I have a lot of problems with the politics of Battlestar Galactica, but it was still a good show, and I enjoyed it, and I watched all of it, right? I have a lot of problems with Battlestar Galactica. But The Expanse feels like it's trying to do that same kind of, like, very serious, like, sci-fi future, like, politics and military and all kinds of shit going on. I couldn't tell you what the show's about. I watched the entire first season. There's, like, different planets who hate each other and different factions and shit and, like, whatever.
So it's about politics.
Yeah, and also, like, lying and conspiracies and, like, people.
So is it like Game of Thrones in space? No?
No.
Because Game of Thrones
Like
has a
the
lot of,
Muppets?
okay.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones has a lot of politics and
kind-
scheming and stuff. But
kind of, but you could say a lot of things are
True.
like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
They do such a bad job of building interest. Like, almost all of the characters, there's some of them that I think could be interesting if they gave them any fucking time to be interesting, but, like, one of the there's 2 main dudes that are just the most boring people in the world, and I can't remember their names. So there was a whole scene where they went to visit one of their fathers or one of their mothers, and they kept being like, Holden. I was like, who the fuck is Holden? I was like, oh, he's the main guy that we've been following the whole time. Like, so bored and uninteresting. And so like, it's just so blah, and they don't do good character development. And then when they try to, like, build relationships between the characters, I'm like, oh, when did we get there? Like, how did we even get to that point? I'm sorry, y'all, there's some noise happening in the background, so I'm just gonna shout that out because Phil's gonna be upset about that. Okay, so the one person that I really like on the show is Shorea
Dashlu?
Yes, thank you.
She's
I'm
on
like,
the show? Cool.
She's delightful and wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that I can't pronounce her name well. Thank you for the save. She's on it, and she's wonderful, and she's, like, the saving grace of the show. So my question to everybody is, I thought it was all really boring. The end got a little bit better only because I finally found out the actual thing that was happening that they built up over time. Do I watch season 2? Yes or no? Because one, also season 2 you have to pay for. It's not included with Amazon Prime like season 1. So, yeah, I would like to know people's opinions about whether it's worth my time to continue this piece of shit show. All right, that's our show. You can catch us back here every single Wednesday. We could not make this podcast happen without our generous backers on Drip. Drip is Kickstarter's brand new subscription-based crowdfunding platform. Help us keep bringing this podcast to you every week by joining the FemFreak community. We've even got some great rewards for you. So pitch in now at d.rip/femfreak. Also, if you want to hear the bonus episode where we talk about Call Me By Your Name more, including about the fruit...
Nope.
Then
Yep.
you want to be a drip backer so you can get access to that. If you're enjoying this show, we have a favor to ask you. Please leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere that you get your podcasts, because it really helps us spread the word about the show. And, you know, tell your friends too, who might be vacationing in Italy as we speak and need a podcast to entertain themselves with. You can check out all of our work and our other podcasts, including our Star Trek Discovery podcast at feministfrequency.com. And we want to hear from you. So hit us up on Twitter. Carolyn, where are you at?
I am at Carolyn Michelle.
Ebony.
I am at Vintage Converse.
Oh, I like that one. Or also, alternatively, at Ebony Astor.
Mm-hmm.
I am at Anita Sarkeesian. Our producer is Phil Circus, who also composed our theme music. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
Later.